You are listening to the Objects of Affection collection. Study 50. From the Aura to the Simulacrum, Jean Baudrillard and the Crisis of the Authentic. The concept of authenticity, once a seemingly unshakable foundation for humanistic and aesthetic value, entered a terminal state during the 20th century. This collapse was not sudden, but a precise historical and ontological wound, beginning with the technological fracturing of the object's unique presence and culminating in the total collapse of all external reference. This intellectual crisis, traced with acute clarity through the work of Walter Benjamin and Jean Baudrillard, reveals the inability of modern and postmodern thought to stabilize the authentic in the face of two dominant forces: mass culture and technological abstraction. For fields dedicated to the maintenance and comprehension of singular value, particularly the realm of high luxury, this failure poses an existential threat, as the foundational concepts of scarcity and uniqueness are constantly undermined by perfect digital fidelity and pervasive systemic simulation. The core thesis of this study is that the intellectual journey from Benjamin's localized loss of the aura to Baudrillard's generalized hyperreality and the dominance of the simulacrum represents a linear decline into ontological nihilism. This progression demonstrates why traditional aesthetic or ideological critique is now insufficient to restore genuine value. Consequently, the commitment to the one original principle, grounded in an affirmation of the physical object's material as story, is positioned here as the necessary structural defense against the differential logic of the hyperreal sign and the informational entropy of digital duplication. This maneuver necessitates a decisive philosophical shift, moving beyond mere lamentation to proactive ontological construction. The critical theory stasis and the need for a new ontology. Critical theory, originating mainly from the Frankfurt School tradition to which Benjamin belonged, achieved immense success in exposing and deconstructing ideological systems, power structures, and the manipulation inherent in capitalist consumption. Yet, this success was achieved at the cost of sacrificing a stable concept of objective essence. Post-structuralist thought, in particular, correctly interrogated the fixed nature of signs and the binary oppositions of earlier philosophies. However, this relentless deconstruction often led to theoretical paralysis when faced with the question of authenticity. The prevailing limitation is the philosophical tradition's post-Kantian reliance on correlationism. Correlationism, in essence, posits that reality is accessible only through its relation to human thought or perception, thus privileging human consciousness and social mediation in defining value. Critical thought, by emphasizing the linguistic turn and social construction, inadvertently circumscribes inquiry to the self-contained sphere of sociocultural mediation. This emphasis made the authentic impossible to anchor outside of subjective experience or social judgment, thereby reducing the material object to a passive canvas for signification. The inability to articulate a non-relational essence ultimately prepared the material artifact for Baudrillard's final semiotic abstraction, demonstrating a profound limitation. The critique of authenticity often falls into the trap of requiring an essentialist structure, leading to metaphysical problems that current accounts fail to solve, resulting in arguments for abandoning the ideal altogether. To re-anchor authenticity, a philosophical move is required to redefine the object's reality beyond its correlation with the human subject. The epoch of loss, Benjamin, ritual, and the erosion of the aura as the unique embodiment of history. Walter Benjamin's essay, The Work of Art in the Age of Mechanical Reproduction, 1935, provides the indispensable starting point for understanding the crisis. Benjamin defined the aura of a work of art as its uniqueness. More profoundly, the aura is articulated as the unique phenomenon of a distance, however close it may be. Benjamin meticulously identified this aura with the artifact's presence in time and space, its unique existence at the place where it happens to be. This is not a mystical property, but a unique cultural context and a verifiable history, achieved through a historicizing gaze. The unique existence of the work determines the history to which it has been subject throughout its duration. This history encompasses two crucial elements: the physical changes suffered over the years and the various changes in ownership. Benjamin insists that the traces of the former, the physical condition, can be revealed only by chemical or physical analyses which it is impossible to perform on a reproduction. This material trace, inherent only to the original, is the definitive proof of its unique historical trajectory. The aura, in this sense, is the palpable presence of the past one has lost, an invested ability of the artwork to look back at us. Ritual and the cult value of the object. Benjamin rooted the value of the authentic object not merely in its aesthetics, but in its historical function. The unique value of the genuine work of art is grounded in ritual, which serves as the locus of its original use value. Artistic production began with ceremonial objects intended for cult use, where their existence mattered more than their exhibition. This ritualistic basis, however remote, remains recognizable as secularized ritual even in the most profane forms of the cult of beauty. The cult of beauty that prevailed during the Renaissance maintained this ritualistic anchor, even as it entered a deep crisis. This connection highlights the inherent vulnerability of authenticity. Its power depended upon its integration into a specific fabric of tradition. The original's power was intrinsically linked to its contextual integration within a ritualistic structure, however secularized. Mechanical reproduction and the reversal of function. The technological breakthrough of mechanical reproduction, particularly photography and film, initiated an irreversible causal relationship that fundamentally reversed the totality of art's function. The technique detaches the reproduced object from the domain of tradition, effectively prying an object from its shell and destroying its aura. Reproduction satisfies the masses' desire to bring things closer, facilitating a new, transitory, and reproducible form of perception. The critical consequence is that the moment the criterion of authenticity ceases to apply to artistic production, a condition inherent in media designed for infinite reproducibility, such as a photographic negative, where asking for the authentic print makes no sense, the foundational purpose of art undergoes a total reversal. Its function shifts from being based on cult and ritual to being based on exhibition and, potentially, politics. However, the tragedy of Benjamin's diagnosis lies in the fragility of his object's anchor. His insistence that the original's material history is only verifiable through chemical or physical analysis that cannot be performed on a reproduction reveals a profound structural truth. The vanishing aura was, at its heart, tethered to the unique materiality of the object, the singular, verifiable, and non-replicable event history of its existence. This focus on material trace aligns perfectly with the definition of material as story in the context of the institutional pivot. The age of hyperreality. Baudrillard and the semiotic collapse the culmination. The simulacrum and the disappearance of the real. If Benjamin mapped the wound of the mechanical age, Jean Baudrillard charted the ontological catastrophe of the informational age. Baudrillard's analysis posits that contemporary society has completed the reversal of function by replacing all reality and meaning with self-referential symbols and signs. This trajectory is modeled through the successive phases of the image, leading inexorably to the dominance of the simulacrum. Baudrillard traces the evolution of the sign from the faithful image, stage 1, to the perversion of reality, stage 2, masking and denaturing reality, to the mask that hides the absence of a profound reality, stage 3, a copy with no original. The ultimate contemporary phase is the pure simulacrum, stage 4, a sign that has no relationship to any reality whatsoever. This is not merely a false copy, as Baudrillard famously stated. The simulacrum is never what hides the truth. It is the truth that hides that there is none. The simulacrum is true. The simulacrum operates as a construct for us to consume, a sign that dissimulates that there is nothing behind it. This defines the condition of hyperreality, a state in which the distinction between reality and its representation becomes fluid, and the codes, images, and models, such as media simulations, Disneyland, or virtual reality, provide experiences more intense and involving than the banal everyday, becoming more real than real. The real is not merely eroded but entirely replaced by self-referential simulations, as exemplified by a staged, meticulously controlled environment like the Truman Show. Sign value and the abstraction of luxury. Baudrillard's critical innovation lay in introducing the category of sign value as the one that truly dictates modern consumption, superseding the Marxian emphasis on use value and exchange value. Sign value is the logic of status. It is determined purely differentially, entirely in terms of the object's difference from other objects within a system, and is indifferent to the object's actual material qualities. According to Baudrillard, the art auction serves as the ideological matrix for the political economy of the sign. It is an experimental terrain where economic exchange value money is exchanged for pure sign, the painting. The decisive action is a double reduction of both the money exchange value and the painting symbolic value, which are then transmuted into sign value, the signed, appraised painting as a luxury value and rare object. This conversion is achieved through expenditure, which is defined as a manifest destruction of wealth. In this process, money is nullified as a divisible exchange value and converted into an indivisible sumptuary value, establishing an aristocratic parity with the canvas that has become a sign of prestige. This analysis of luxury consumption directly supports the post-luxury diagnosis described in The Luster Restored. The profound threat to authenticity inherent in this differential logic is the very engine of the hyperreal system. Because luxury value is defined exclusively by its relational difference, sign value, and not by an internal ontological essence, the system of simulation can perfectly reproduce the differential sign. A high-fidelity copy or a digital duplication, particularly when backed by sufficient institutional validation, can signify rarity and status just as effectively as the physical original. This semiotic maneuver collapses the unique aesthetic authority that Benjamin sought to preserve. The copy, therefore, becomes structurally indistinguishable from the model. The sign precedes, and in fact annihilates the referent. The object as self-simulation, the intellectual progression from the aura to the simulacrum, culminates when the luxury artifact ceases to represent an external reality, wealth, tradition, cult, and becomes a simulation of itself. The value of a masterpiece like the Mona Lisa, as critics have noted, is no longer derived from its content or beauty, but derived by virtue of being the painting that it is. It has ceased to represent anything other than its own existence as an object of immense, culturally mandated sign value. This self-simulation defines the hyperreal luxury object, a pure sign of its own status. It exemplifies the transition from an object that carries the traces of history to one that merely carries the codified expectation of value. This displacement renders the object's historical and physical reality secondary to its codified image, setting the stage for the object's total domination over the subject, as the system of signs becomes all-encompassing. The intellectual abyss, the critical theory failure to re-anchor essence, the paralysis of deconstruction, the theoretical tools developed to diagnose the crisis of authenticity, simultaneously rendered philosophy incapable of constructing a stable defense against it. Post-structuralism, while indispensable for understanding the mediation of culture and the contingency of meaning, focused its energy on the critical interrogation of fixed structures and the rejection of objective or essentialist structures. The desire for intellectual rigor led to arguments for abandoning the ideal of authenticity, viewing it as built upon confused assumptions about the self and outdated essentialist models. By prioritizing the linguistic turn and the ideological vigilance of sociocultural mediation, material and somatic realities were critically sidelined, often explored only to the extent of their discursive inscription. The material artifact was reduced to a semiotic representation of social relations or human interests. This intellectual posture, while crucial for anti-totalitarian critique, inadvertently affirmed the Baudrillardian universe where reality is merely a construction of signs. Once the material essence is viewed solely as a culturally determined signifier, the hyperreal system, which manufactures signifiers ad infinitum, becomes invincible. Baudrillard's fatalism and the domination of the object. Baudrillard's later work, exemplified by the concept of fatal strategies, confirmed the theoretical paralysis. He described the ecstasy and proliferation of objects, their constant expansion and acceleration, which ultimately lead to the domination of the object world over the exhausted subject. The traditional subject, operating on the premise that it is always more clever than the object, is defeated by the object, which is always supposed to be more shrewd, more cynical, more brilliant than the subject. Benjamin had hoped to emancipate culture by shifting art's basis from ritual to politics. Baudrillard confirmed the total aestheticization of everything by the hyperreal code. In the simulacrum, political action and aesthetic critique are themselves mediated, packaged, and instantly simulated. This functional reversal leads directly to nihilism. The subject loses all leverage to define value outside the dominant, self-referential code. The failure of 20th century critique to construct a positive, enduring ontological anchor for authenticity leaves those seeking singular value trapped in a perpetual cycle of diagnosis without remedy. The necessary heresy, restoring the object's integrity, the only path out of this theoretical impasse, is an act of philosophical defiance. The necessity of defining a singular non-relational essence that exists stubbornly outside the linguistic and semiotic system. To move beyond the limitations of correlationism, the defense of authenticity must deliberately escape the tyranny of the subject and the reduction of material culture to mere semiotic representation of social bedrock. The solution requires affirming that the object possesses an independent, intrinsic reality that cannot be ontologically exhausted by human perception, interpretation, or semiotic encoding. We must shift the burden of proof from the relational, how humans value the object, back to the existential, the object's unique, irreducible event status, the one original principle. An ontological defense of singularity, the principle as structural antithesis, the one original principle, is the categorical refusal to produce duplicates or variants, positioning the artifact not as a design model awaiting reproduction, but as a final, non-fungible physical event. This principle is an intellectual defense, explicitly structured to counteract the sense of the universal equality of things, imposed by reproducibility, the very force Benjamin identified as destroying the aura. This commitment defends the integrity of the unique physical event against the abstract logic of the hyperreal model. By eliminating the model-copy relationship, the principle directly targets the foundation of the simulacrum's power, which relies on the ability to generate a stage 3 or stage 4 sign, a copy without an original, or a sign without a referent. By mandating that there is only the original, the system is prevented from ever entering the realm of copies and simulations. This core tenet is foundational to the entire post-luxury conceptual functional art, post-luxury conceptual functional art framework. Singularity as resistance, the object created under the one original principle, is not merely rare, it is a rebellious singularity. Baudrillard, in his discussions on the overwhelming power of the system, noted that the generalized world engages in a war of fractal complexity, waged worldwide against rebellious singularities that, in the manner of antibodies, mount a resistance in every cell. This observation provides the structural justification for the one original principle. The singular object represents a point of breakdown for the system of generalized exchange. Baudrillard himself acknowledged that genuine symbolic exchange is predicated on the singular, where value emerges from the unique, unrepeatable situation, in contrast to sign value, which depends on encoding and standardization within a differential system. By enforcing singularity, the object escapes the standard differential sign value, transforming its value from an encoded position within a corpus of interchangeable signs into a unique, unrepeatable existential condition. The singular object, by its very existence, mounts a resistance to the totalizing logic of the simulacrum, enforcing the boundary of reality. The absolute refusal of duplication inherent in the one original principle performs a necessary philosophical function. It establishes the boundary separating the simulation from contingent reality. Simulation, as an organizing principle, thrives when the boundaries between the constructed and the real worlds are blurred or vanish entirely, as in hyperreality. The principle serves as a non-negotiable axiom. Any attempt to produce a copy, whether high-fidelity physical duplicate or perfect digital abstraction, is a deliberate violation of the object's unique, inscribed material history. This creates an unbridgeable ontological gulf between the original, the contingent, singular event, and any subsequent attempt at imitation, the standardized, generalized sign. The one original principle is thus deployed not merely as a business strategy, but as an ontological mandate to preserve the integrity of the artifact's physical instantiation against informational and semiotic entropy. The remainder of this study continues at objectsofaffectioncollection.com. This has been a study from the Objects of Affection Collection, a critical art research institution operating under the framework of post-luxury conceptual functional art. Read the full research at objectsofaffectioncollection.com.